There we go. Yeah, I'll turn it on. So, my name is Lyon Rathbun. I'm a retired professor from UT RGV, and Carlos and I have known each other for 25 years or so. And the way we met was that Carlos and his wife ran a chapter of the writing project in Laredo.
Wait a minute. Can we see how we sound without the mic? Can we check out, see how we sound without the mic?
Yeah, I think you do need the microphone.
We can leave it on or off?
You hear him well because you're there, but I think the rest...
Okay.
But are you guys hearing the echo that I hear?
A little bit.
Does that bother you?
No.
Okay, fine. Go
Should I
ahead.
try speaking without the mic?
Yes, try.
Better? Yeah.
You have the voice of the professor.
Ah, that's what my wife says. She says, "Stop talking." So Carlos and I have known each other for quite a while, and it's a great honor and a pleasure to be participating in this event because it feels like I'm inside Carlos's novel. The novel takes place right here in Laredo. It's called Escandon, and Nuevo Laredo is called Nuevo Escandon. But there are important scenes that take place right here in the plaza and right in the hotel where I'm staying, the Hotel Posada. So being a friend of Carlos involves entering his literary world.
What?
Entering your literary world, because Carlos lives, breathes, sleeps literature. He is the most dedicated writer I've ever met. He's completely dedicated to his craft. And this book, Pillars of Creation, is the culmination of many, many decades of Carlos practicing his craft. And it's when I read the book, I was just awed by it. It was just an amazing book. And one of Carlos's old friends and colleagues, another writer from Laredo, from Laredo originally, Norma Cantu, in another presentation, she described the book as a tour de force. And when I heard that, I immediately agreed with that description of the book, but I didn't quite know what it meant. The first thing I did was look up the word tour de force. And the etymology of the word sheds a lot of light on this book. So tour de force is originally a French word. Tourner means turn in French. So it originally meant it originally had a meaning of physical force, an act that had great physical force or impact. And it's helpful to think of that word in a physical kind of context. You know, think of Babe Ruth hitting a home run with all of the bases loaded. That's a tour de force, right? Or I've been amazed by the current world record holder in the pole vault. He's a young man from Sweden, and to watch him go over the pole, the bar, meet the bar with the pole vault, is a tour de force. So, in English, tour de force has been used to describe also works of art, not simply feats of physical dexterity or accomplishment. And in English, the word means a feat of power, force, or skill. And that's what this work is. It's a work of power and skill in two particular ways. It's a work of power in describing this place. where most of you live or are familiar with. In the book, Laredo is disguised as Escandon. Nuevo Laredo is portrayed as Nuevo Escandon. But it's Laredo. And it's an incredibly vivid description of what it's like to live in this place. So that's one of the ways that it's powerful. The other way that it's powerful and skillful is that the book centers on the main character whose name is Yolik.
Loltic.
Yoltik, I'm sorry. Yoltik is a young man who is aspiring to become a writer. And he's plagued by guilt, by shame, by confusion. And it's a story of how he comes to terms with his inner conflicts. And that involves coming to terms with his faith. And that's a very important part of the story. It's a deeply felt story of coming of age. In a sense, it has this universal element. The part about Laredo is very particular, but the part about Yolik's growth and development as a human being is universal. So the book is both very particular and also universal. That's the quality of a classic, and it's one of the things that makes this a truly memorable and noteworthy book. So let me just share one anecdote before we get into the conversation that illustrates the power that this book has. About 2 weeks ago, I went to a retirement party for one of my old friends who taught in the history department at UTRGV, where I taught for many years. And at this retirement party, there was a young man, a Gen Zer in his early 20s, who was sitting at the table. There were dozens of people in groups, they were all talking, and he was sitting at the table, scrolling on his phone and playing a game on his phone, totally tuned out to the conversations. A typical Gen Zer. And I was eating a pizza next to him, and I started talking with him. And I asked him if he was a student. And he said, well, I just transferred to UTRGV. I was he told me that he had been a kinesiology major at a Baptist college in Houston. And he had just moved to UTRGV, and he was declaring his major as a philosophy major. And so I said to him, so you're looking for, you're searching for meaning and purpose, is that right? And he looked at me and he nodded his head. And I said, I have a book that you have to read. It's titled Pillars of Creation by Carlos Flores. And I wrote the title down, and I gave him a brief description of the book. That it's about a young man who's trying to find himself and find his place in the world and establish himself in a relationship with a woman he's in love with, and in his profession. He wants to become a writer. And to achieve this goal he has to come to terms with his faith, with his the conflict that he feels between the faith he's inherited from his father and his own lack of belief in any kind of higher power. And if he has to resolve that before he can establish a relationship with the woman he's in love with, and before he can launch himself into his career as a writer. And that's what the book involves. And it all takes place right here right in Laredo. So with that background, what I'd like to do is ask Carlos some questions about the features of the book that I've just described. And we're going to be looking at some of the passages from the book and using those as a springboard for a conversation about these two major features of the book that I've just identified. Okay, yes?
Comments. First of all, I want to thank Jorge, where is he? For hosting me here. Jorge and I are working together on a number of projects. Besides, we have been working together on a number of projects for many, many years. And I want to thank you for suggesting that I do this here and for hosting us, definitely. And then I want to thank Lyon for coming up here. I said, the person needs to do this is Lyon, because we've been talking about this book on and off for years, and many of the issues underlying the book. And so I said, okay, you need to come, and do this with me, because coming up here by yourself and trying to do something like this, especially with as many, with what I could call the complexity of this novel, with so many loose ends going in different directions, that sometimes I forget what I'm doing. I told him earlier that on the phone, I said, talking to you right now about this novel feels like I'm standing in the lobby of this huge skyscraper that I built, but and you're outside in the sidewalk, and there are things about the skyscraper that you can point out to me that I cannot see or understand because I'm inside of it, right? And that's what it feels like when I listen to him. So anyway, and I want to thank all of y'all, my friends that are here, from a number of groups. Right now we're in the middle of a huge literary renaissance in many ways, literary movement, a number of things that are going on. Maybe I'll be a chance to mention them later on in the Q&A session. But what I wanted to say about Lyon's introduction is the following. This book, at the basic level, is the search for purpose and meaning in a world in which the German philosopher, born in 1844, declared that God was dead. Now, what does that mean, that God is dead? Well, in order to, I didn't understand that fully when I first heard it, and that was many, many years ago. But it wasn't until I went to Europe, finally, that I had a glimpse of what it might mean. Europe has the most beautiful cathedrals everywhere. Everywhere you go, they have these beautiful cathedrals and churches and convents and so forth. Even in England, even in the United Kingdom, even the Protestant countries have them. And so there's only one thing. And at one time, these churches, which is a combination of theater, a musical instrument, what else? Architecture, art, you name it, sculpture. It's a combination of all those things, were the center of a community. That was the center. And of course, you had murals, for example, to depict all the stories of the Bible, the New Testament and so forth, in order to teach the community, about themselves, about their role in the world. Today, those churches are empty. By and large, they're empty. And everywhere. Spain, France, all over. There are many reasons why that happened. One, for sure, is industrialization and wealth. There are other reasons, but I'm not going to go into them. So that's the world in which, according to Nietzsche and according to Yoltik, we live. It's a secular world. And in fact, right now, one of the great issues at the heart of this huge debate and polarization that's happening in this country is that. What is the role of Christianity in the lives of people, of Americans? What's it going to be? And I don't want to go into, the positions of that because, we'll never finish. But I'm trying to understand it in the context of what I'm writing about here. So anyway, when I first heard that, again, that Nietzsche had said that God was dead, I really didn't fully understand. But I did understand that something was missing in my life, because I grew up basically outside the church, all of them, I mean, I heard about them, I didn't understand them, I didn't like them, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where a lot of the information, or at least the background that I bring to the book comes from. So I thought, well, maybe I should write a lot about that, especially on the border right now, where some people would say God is dead, given all the violence and all the chaos that are going on. Now, I know some people would say, no, they're not. It's not. I know. A pastor told me just the other day, I was talking about the book. He says, well, Nietzsche was wrong. And I understand where my friend the pastor is coming from. But that's not my point. That's not the point of this. It's for some of us, especially for Yoltic, that is what's happened. But anyway, so therefore, the bottom line is, this book is about a young man living in a colonia named Cuatro Vientos, al sur de Escandón, okay, al sur de Escandón, impoverished, and the book opens with him and his girlfriend Marfil in bed, stoned. Okay, they're stoned and they're about ready to what? Create something, right? They're about ready to connect, as they say. I would like to be more explicit, but one of my editors is here, and so I want to be careful. Anyway, so and so one of the things that they're enjoying, they're enjoying being high, all right? And one of the things that eventually Yoltic tells us, or says to himself, is, I'm just looking, my father told me I need to give up the drugs, but I'm not ready, because the drugs have given me something that the church and all the sermons in the world, et cetera, could not give me. I'm looking for a spiritual experience through the drugs. And if you ever use drugs or drank a lot of alcohol, it doesn't take you to heaven, but it gets you very close. Okay? That's what I've been told. I haven't experienced any of that, needless to say. But anyway, so basically then, this book is about, let me repeat it to you. Okay? I got the wrong glasses on. Let me get the other ones. Okay, the pillars of creation. A quest for the great name in a Nietzschean world. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, I already told you what a Nietzschean world was. A quest is a search. The great name, that comes from the Jewish tradition, hundreds of years ago, a Jewish tradition that you did not mention the name of God anywhere at all. The only one that could pronounce it, the only one who could utter it, was the high priest, and only once a year in the temple. Which means then, that's how much reverence they had for God. That's the kind of relationship those people in those days had for God. Okay? So today, what does God mean? It may mean something, may mean nothing. Oh, there you go again with this business of God. There you go again. Etc. And that's what he realizes that. It's like saying Coca-Cola. What's God? And blah, 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 blah. All right. So he is looking for a name. And let me tell you at least an experience that helped me understand what I was trying to do there. I recently told a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, a relative in fact, I said, well, the name of God is, here's what I would like to call him. Here's what I personally call him when I speak of him. And then I said the name. And then later on, this individual ridiculed me. Oh, well, da 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 da. I don't want to mention the name now because I felt the name was disrespected. I told her, look, this is a name that I use when I talk. I don't use the word God. I don't use any other one. But that's the one I use. And so when this individual made fun of that, I said, I'm not going to mention that ever again. Okay, I'm not going to mention that ever again because she not insulted me, but it offended me. And it shows that therefore there is no real public consensus as to what we're going to respect and not respect. Okay? And that has a long history throughout Europe that you have to go into, and war after war between the Protestants and Catholics, et cetera, to understand how we've gotten to where we've gotten. So therefore, what does Nietzsche say? Nietzsche says, look, you have to, God is dead, Christianity is dead or dying or ineffective. In fact, there's going to be nothing but chaos once that God is dead, and sure enough, the history of world, about the 20th century is an example of that. Okay, but then, and I'll finish here. He said, therefore, what we are left with is we have to create our own values, our new faith, and find that on our own. And so what Yoltic does is that he finds it when he has his experience and sees the pillars of creation. The pillars of creation is the name of a nebula in the Milky Way, and he shows it to his girlfriend. Listen, look at this. This is the Milky Way. Millions of stars are created in this nebula. He says, and that's only a little detail in the larger universe. I mean, how can there not be a God? How can there not be a creator to this? The only thing at issue now is the way we relate to him. You know, we're going to have this tradition or that tradition. Is this going to be my concept or your concept? That's where all the problems come in and the controversy. But for me, this is enough to say, okay, life matters. Do you mind if I read something?
Yeah.
Okay,
Do you want to read the section on
No,
the
one
pillars
minute.
of creation?
No, you can read that, but I'm going to read something else. I want
Okay.
to bring to you guys.
What page are you reading from?
I'm going to read to you. Let me see if you recognize what I read to you, okay? Let's see if you recognize this. It reads, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. Okay? Now, I don't know how you feel about that, but to me, when I first saw that, I said, so what? Okay, but for someone like Yoltic, what it amounts to is this, is that if God created the world, okay, everybody knows that God created the world, but the thing is it good? You know, am I going to accept the way it is? Am I going to live on God's terms, et cetera, et cetera? You know, and so going from God created the world to saying God, the light was good, is a positive assertion. And so the point of the book is this, is that now he said earlier that one of the things that Yoltic is trying to do is develop to become a human being. And so what the book is suggesting, and this doesn't necessarily mean that I'm in agreement, but this book suggests that in order to really fully develop as a human being, my life has to matter. And the cornerstone of that is, do you matter? Does the universe matter? You know, and there are many traditions whereby that arrives at that. The Catholics, the Protestants and all their sects, the Muslim, Islam, etc., the Jews, of course. So anyway, again, going back to this, the book is about finding purpose in one's life in the midst of all this chaos and this violence. And then one more thing, and that is there are some scenes in here that are ugly. All the scenes, all the violent scenes are real. They all happened. Not in this order, not necessarily the way I described them, but they're based on original models that I know about that happened in this region. Anyway, I've talked too much, and I'm sorry, you want to say?
No, that's fine. Let's see, where can we go? I think it would be nice to read a passage from the book so that all of you can get a flavor for the
Go ahead.
writing.
Can you do that?
Yeah, I'd be
Okay.
happy.
All right.
Let me read. I'll read the section where Yoltic is describing the pillars of creation, and so he's with this wonderful young woman, Marfil, and she's testing him out. She's not sure whether he's a flaky pothead or whether he's somebody that she can have a sustained relationship with. And so she asked him, is there a God or isn't there? The popcorn bounced off your chest. Yeah, stop it. You sat up. Can you hand me my laptop? It's behind you on the desk. She reached for it. Here. You opened it on your lap. I want to show you something. A glittering extravaganza of stars. The Milky Way poured onto the screen. That's not what you wanted. Then you found it. Towering pillars of cloud-like convulsions of brown and orange dust, shrouded by tatters and wisps of a dense white haze, filled the screen. Look at this. Looks like 3 dogs. I know. 3 shaggy dogs, Irish setters maybe, leaping into the heavens. She glanced at you. Or the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. I never understood any of that. Me neither. This I understand. Look, stars forming in those pillars, some 8,000 stars. That's why they're called the pillars of creation, or the Eagle Nebula, about 5 light years tall, 6,500 light years away. And they're so old they could be ghosts. How so? We're seeing images from 6,500 years ago. They might not exist anymore. You both stared at the pillars, which despite the computer screen's confined space, loomed remote, mysterious, and majestic. You haven't answered my question, she murmured. You closed the computer. When I saw the pillars of creation for the first time, I thought, how can there not be a God? What more proof do we want? So he sees this furnace of stars embedded in the Milky Way, and he knows that the same creative force in those stars is in him. So he knows that he's not alone, that there's some power that is alive, that sustains him, that sustains his community, and he obtains the foundations of faith from that.
Okay, there's another theme or interwoven into all of this, and it's the conflict between science and faith or religion. That's another. I told you that maybe that the reason that there's been such a decline in Christianity, or at least the reverence there used to be for Christianity in Europe, would be industrialization. Well, part of industrialization is the presence and the power of science. Okay, so there's been a conflict going on in the West between science and faith, or science and religion. Okay, and so in my book, through the pillars of creation, there's a reconciliation of the two, not in the world, but in Yoltic. So basically, it's almost like he says, okay, the new theology of astronomy, as in a manner of speaking. I mean, how can you study chemistry and biology and quantum physics and all that, and not wonder whether or not this is what you're studying is the mind of God, or I don't know what might be, or dynamics or whatever. So faith on the other, science is what strengthens and gives him the foundation for his faith, or the beginnings of faith. Because someone asked, did he find God? No, but he found the beginnings of it, or at least he found the path to it. But let me read something else that underscores what he just finished reading, that I quoted at the very beginning of the book. Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe, the more often and steadily we reflect upon them. Let me repeat that. Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe, the more often and steadily we reflect upon them. The starry heavens above me, and the moral law within me. It's another way of saying what he just finished saying about the pillars of creation. And where does that come from? Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant, another German philosopher. Continue.
Yeah. So, one of the things that's so powerful about the book is that it doesn't give the reader an answer. It leaves each of us to figure out this puzzle, this challenge that we all face. And Yoltik, on the one hand, this image of the pillars of creation, this star of this furnace that creates stars out of the Milky Way, convinces him that there is something that we can call God that's inside of us, that's around us, but science isn't enough. And in the latter part of the book, Yoltik visits a pastor who becomes a friend of his, and we see the pastor toward the end of the book, and the pastor tells Yoltik, and this is on 244, if any of you want to, at the top of the page. Anyway, said the pastor, today these churches are virtually empty, and he's referring to the great cathedrals in Europe that Carlos was just referring to. The churches are virtually empty. Why? We live in a secular world, a Nietzschean world. God is dead. Nietzsche said we must live beyond good and evil in order to be healthy human beings. But we have seen the horrors of a life beyond good and evil. Science has challenged our Christian beliefs, leaving many with nothing to believe in. We have witnessed horrors of a science without a morality, without God. So Yoltik has to find a moral compass, but on the other hand, it has to be a moral compass and a sense of the deity that's compatible with science. And that's where the book ends. He's caught between the two, and he's finding his way, the way all of us are.
Okay. I was talking recently to a friend of mine, a great Tamaulipas poet, in fact. And he was telling me about a poem that he wrote, which he sent to me then. And it's about Las Madres Buscadoras in Nuevo Laredo. You know what Las Madres Buscadoras are? The mothers that are searching for the remains of their children that have been sequestered or disappeared or murdered or dismembered and buried in fosas, clandestine burial sites. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about them. And I mean, I read the poem. I mean, it's stunned me. And I have written a short story based on it, on my or another book that I have ready to publish, hopefully in a year or two. It's already done, by the way. And we were talking, and I said, I mean, you could tell that these women, are digging with their hands and singing to the Lord, Lord, see my face. Where are you? I didn't quote it properly, but it's really, really tore me up to read that. And that's going on right now among us. Okay? Now, part of that tragedy is part of the larger situation we have with drugs, which is at the heart of this book as well, because my main character is a drug addict, right? Mm-hmm. They too have been looking for something in those drugs apart from money. Okay, and so my friend told me, well, many of them are really, really questioning whether or not there is a God. How can there be a God? How can such a God have allowed this to happen to their children? And no one's doing anything about it. Nothing is happening. How can this happen? And so, in a sense, this is what happens to Yoltik as well. But I have a number of other places. Let me just do a real quick summary of the book so that we're talking about a lot of ideas. Well, let me just tell you what Okay, Yoltik and this girl, Marfil, from Monterrey, are in bed, getting ready to get it on. The both of them are stoned. Why? Because they love it. I mean, he loves it. And of course, it's a means of trying to searching for that spiritual experience, okay? And then suddenly there's an interruption of everything. And he looks outside this window, which I use to call as the crack in the wall, a phrase from Carlos Castañeda. Okay? And he sees these three men, old men, elderly men, walking. They're fishermen. They're carrying fishing poles with them, going down to the river to fish. Now, eventually he has to go into, and so what happened is that the reason she's with him is because she has fled the cartels around Monterrey. And so she turns to him to help her, and he's helping her. That's why she's with him in this shack in Cuatro Vientos, which is the sur, south of Escandon. And so that's where they're at. And then after that, we find out how all this began. One of the things we find out is that the girl fled Monterrey when the cartels came after her grandfather's ranch. And he defended it single-handedly and killed most of the people that are the cartel criminals, but then they killed him. That actually happened in northern, I don't know exactly where, it's around Monterrey as well. So that actually happened. There was a man who defended his ranch, to the end, and then they killed all these people. And everyone was amazed that one man managed to defend his ranch from a bunch of people, assassins. So then there's the whole issue of her trying to go back and trying to save the ranch. Okay. Then on top of that, my main character's father is dying, and he's the one that tells his father, "Listen, you're not ready. You're not ready. You've gotten away from your religious traditions. His mother is Protestant, the father's Catholic. You've gotten away, and one day you're going to have to confront the devil in the desert." Meaning, not literally, but in terms of the challenges that come with being a human being. The temptations and the disappointments that tend to that destroy the souls of many people. Okay, so then of course I won't tell you what happens to the father, and then then the girl keeps backing back and forth. What else is there? Oh, and then there's the failed poet who is a friend. There's a backstory involving the failed poet, who is this Mexican, a descendant of Mexican Indians in northern Chihuahua, who, believe it or not, is brilliant and manages to go to Harvard University, become a Harvard University professor in literature, and then a poet, and then fails as a poet, but then falls in love with Yoltic. So that's a whole other story, and he's his mentor, and he's the one that brings in all this background on Nietzsche and et cetera, et cetera. That too is based on some real models, okay? And then there's a gruesome murder or homicide of a close friend of Yoltic's in Nuevo Escandon. Also happened, and it was so gruesome, so devastating. When I read about this, I said, "Oh my God, this could not have happened. Not near here," but it did. And so I said, "I can't let this go. I have to use this." So that becomes another, that's where that woman is killed, right? By Comandante.
Right.
And I'd like to go over it, but I don't want to, if you don't mind. But anyway, so the story is not just simply about all these meditations and reflections about philosophy and this and that. He's also dealing with all this shit. His poverty, the father's death or would-be death, his mother's already gone, and then trying to save this girl, and then is he going to fall in love with her or not? He's afraid of her. He's not ready to commit to her. So there's a lot of other stuff that's going on within the novel. It's not just simply, as I said, these reflections about that. And I want to make sure I got that across, because you may be wondering you may be wondering what the hell this is all about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It's about this place, and cartel violence is a big part of life all along the border. So, Carlos, let me bring up another aspect of the novel that displays the great skill with which it's written. And this is a little bit of a technical issue, but when we explain it, you'll see the importance of it. Up until the last chapter, the book is written in the second person. So when Yoltik is thinking, he's always saying, you think this, you do this, talking to himself. And his girlfriend, Marfil, is very disturbed by that. She suspects that he is coming unhinged mentally, and he is. I mean, that's a symptom of schizophrenia, right? But it's that he's hearing all of these voices in his head. The voice of his mother telling him to find a good woman and settle down and get off the drugs. His father telling him that he has to come back to his faith. His own guilt telling him that he's been a bad son. So he's hearing these voices, which I certainly identify with. I mean, it brings his emotional struggle very vividly to life. And at the end of the book, he switches. And actually, Carlos, if you could read the very last paragraph.
But before I do that, I want to read something else.
Okay, go ahead.
If you don't mind. Let me explain the cover to you. Okay? When I first saw this painting from a painter out of Dallas, I fell in love with it. I said, this painting contains, this is what my book is about. This. Okay? He says it's told in the second person. The first time the book was rejected by a university press, it was rejected because it was in the second person. It tells you sometimes we don't know who the hell we're dealing with in the publishing industry. Okay? Or in readers, even, to be honest with you. I shouldn't be saying that because I'm already getting a bad reputation. But anyway, be that as it may. But I went ahead with it. Second person. Modeled after, first of all, after Aura and La Región Más Transparente by Carlos Fuentes, Mexican writer, as well as, who else? Oh, well, yeah, definitely that. And then, of course, another writer that I modeled the book after was Les Nausées by Jean-Paul Sartre. But what I want to talk to you about is this cover. What is the cover about? It's precisely about the division within the self. I talking to myself. And so if I'm talking to myself, there are two selves involved. The conscious me, the guilty me, and then whatever resides deep inside me, the dark self that he talks about, the Jungian self. Okay? So that Jungian self then incarnates, theoretically speaking, metaphorically speaking, as the devil. Okay? In the mind of these guys. So therefore, this is why I quoted this in the beginning. And it's I'll tell you who said it first. When Tinhan, a Russian Orthodox priest, asks Stavrogin, a troubled young aristocrat accused of raping a young girl, whether he has really seen the devil, the latter replies, "Of course I see him. I see him as plainly as I see you. And sometimes I do not know who is real, he or I." So if you take that into consideration, this dilemma between the inner self of my character and his outer self and character, the dark self versus, let's say, the rational self, is reflected in this cover. That's what that's about. And ultimately, what I'm going to read to you then is the last one, right? Where those two are reconciled. All right? Okay, what page is that on?
280. It's the very last paragraph. You can start, you entered the gate.
Okay. This is, they're on Cuatro Vientos. He's at his house. A lot of crap has happened, a lot of tragedy. He's amazed that he's alive and he's still with Marfil. Okay? He's already been confronted the devil. That's a whole other scene that you can read about later on. And then he says, you enter the gate, again, the I addressing the inner self. You enter the gate, you cross the yard, stopped by the garden, and told Marfil you were going back inside to call you if she needed anything. You climb the stairs to the porch where you turn and look south toward Mexico, where your father's spirit has gone. Like the people of this region and your ancestors before you, you had no choice but to live here, and so you had no choice but to love it for what it was and live through what lay ahead. Moreover, as legions of demons arrived in black Suburbans under the cloak of darkness, under the cloak of darkness, and turned the state of Tamaulipas into a province of mass graves, while northern voices called for a wall on the Rio Grande, you and I became one and speak with one voice. No more fear and trembling. Much work and struggle, yes, but no more loathing, because that splits up. Yeah. So that, in a nutshell, really is what he's after. You know, he didn't find God, but he's close. He didn't marry the girl. He has not, but he's almost there. And oh, by the way, then there's a very symbolic last scene where we have a garden and we have a snake, which also has all kinds of. I didn't know whether or not I was going to include that. I said, well, someone's going to say, that's corny. I said, oh, but just go with it. So there's a snake that they encounter, and Yoltik, clarifies the whole issue. No, it was not poisonous. It looked like a rattler, but it wasn't. But anyway, that's it for the time.
Well, that's an important scene, Carlos, because you're flirting with creating a Nietzschean character. You're flirting with making Yoltik Nietzschean. In other words, somebody who thinks that he can do whatever the hell he wants, and it doesn't matter. But he's not. He's deeply influenced by his father's Christian faith. And in that last scene, they're in the garden, and Yoltik's good friend thinks that the snake they found is a rattlesnake, and he wants to kill it. And Yoltik looks at the snake again and sees that it's not a rattlesnake, it's a bull snake, which is not dangerous. And so he saves the snake. He doesn't kill it. He is dedicated to the fostering of life. Mm-hmm. And Nietzsche was shockingly hostile to Christianity. He believed that Christianity was a slave religion. And that last chapter shows that Yoltik he's not a Nietzschean character. He distinguishes between good and evil, and he's dedicated to the preservation of life. That's what that scene tells me.
Yes.
In any case.
One more thing, he's off the pot. He's done with drugs. In that scene. This is a year later. And then one more comment regarding that. One of the things that is essential to the novel is understanding that drugs have a pivotal role in this book. Based on all my studies and my research into dealing with alcoholism and drug addiction and all that, show that in certain schools of thought, drug addiction, alcoholism is fundamentally a spiritual condition. And if it's not dealt at that level, it's not dealt with at all. I mean, and it's amazing how many people die every year in this country from alcoholism alone. It's no wonder they call them diseases of despair. Despair over what? That there is no God. And to say that there is no God means there is no purpose. It doesn't matter. Fuck you. Fuck the world. That's who Yoltik was in a certain way before. But now, but the tradition, the Christian tradition, doesn't help him at all, except maybe unconsciously as a result of his father and mother. But the science does, and so he, in many ways, finds that faith on his own as much as he can. Well, no, not entirely his own, because he has help from the pastor, he has help from a lot of people, as it turns out. So, meant drug, meant demons, and even the Greeks understood way back when. That's where pharmacology comes from. And so even the Greeks understood that it was a spiritual malay. It was a spiritual condition that needed to be dealt with. And so that's, in many ways, also the condition at the heart of this book. But I've already spoken too much. Go ahead.
Well, we should open it up to questions, discussion, because we only have about 10, 15 minutes before we need to wrap this up.
What was the page where you read the pillars?
Let me get that page again for you. I think it's 148. Let me double check it.
I know that. Thank you.
Yeah, 147, 148. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Who did this painting? Who did it?
Marcus Dominus. It's right here. It's
In the acknowledgments?
yeah. Where is it?
Yeah, next week, artwork by Mark Dominos and cover design by God Almighty Abogado.
Right. Mark Dominus. And you can find him on the internet.
Beautiful.
Pardon?
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Cover.
Any other questions?
The names. What makes me wonder is the names of these two main characters,
Yoltik?
Joltek and Marfil.
What about him?
Where do you get those names from, or if they have any particular significance beyond
Yes.
the story? Because if I think of the Marfil of the teeth is something really hard,
Right.
white. But then I'm not really sure whether this particular character in this book has that, I want to say, significance in the story.
This is interesting. Some of my French Chicano writers and editors got upset of that character because she was white. And I said, don't you know that there are white Mexicans? Especially in northern Mexico, around Monterrey. But I didn't tell her. So Marfil refers to, and by the way, Marfil, it turns out, is the name of a clerk at one of the local gyms. And when I ran into her, and the girl, my character, had another name. And so when I ran into her, and I said, what is your name? And I don't know why I asked her. And she said, it's Marfil. I said, what is it, Marfil? Really? Oh, wow. And then I looked it up, what it meant. Of course, I already knew what it meant. Ivory, it means ivory. Okay, and so I like that name, Marfil. Now, some friends of mine, Chicanos as well, objected to the name. I said, I don't care, I like the name. Screw you. But anyway, then Yoltik's name is Yoltik, which is Indigena, Nahuatl. Okay, where does it come from? From one of my students, who was güero. I mean, he looked like a gringo, and his name was Yoltik. And I said, where'd you get that name? I don't know, my father gave it to me. What is it? It's Aztec. You don't know why? No, that's your name. I said, okay, I'll go with that, because a lot of us are like that, right? Okay, then his mixed name, his middle name is Praxedis, which is this old Mexican name. They used to have all these weird, very old, that these old names in Mexico, right? His name is Praxedis, but his father, whose name is Praxedis, hated the name. So it says, the mother liked it. So ahí se quedó con Yoltic Praxedis, and then para acabarla de fregar, le di el nombre de Cortés, el gran conquistador y el padre de México, según ciertos historiadores mexicanos. And so,
Violador.
¿ah?
El violador.
Bueno, I empieza la bronca, okay, fine. But anyway, that's another discussion we have to have, and God willing, we'll have it one of these days.
I don't want to open a can of worms.
Well, you already did, Patricia. I mean, Sylvia. All right, anything else?
I associated, just a comment, I associated his second name, Praxedis, as coming from Greek.
That too. Because they were giving a lot of classical names to the Mexicans at that time under, I think it was under, what's his name? I forget the name of the director of culture in Mexico at the time.
Yeah.
Vasconcelos. José de Vasconcelos.
And later in the book, his two names become woven into his split personality.
Right.
Yeah.
Praxedis becomes the name of the devil that's beleaguering him. That's the name of the devil that's driving him nuts. Okay, so it's a fight between Praxedis and Yoltic, and that's later on. In fact, the person who pointed out is who? Marfil.
Right. Yeah.
Did you have something to say? Anybody else? Any comments?
Can you explain how it's not autobiographical?
Okay, I leave that to distinguished Dr. Lyon Rathbun.
That's a good question. There's one element that the author and the protagonist have in common. They're both obsessed with writing. And they both believe deeply in the value of literature. And that's a theme of the book that we haven't really discussed enough. But they believe that that literature has a profound importance to our culture. That without literature, we have no way of seeing ourselves as who we really are. We have no way of telling the truth about ourselves in a way that we can really understand. And I think that's something that the author believes very deeply. You know, I said at the beginning that he eats, breathes, and sleeps literature. It's something that Carlos deeply and authentically believes in. And I think we're all fortunate for that because we have this book as a result. And Yoltic shares that faith. So they have that in common. But here's where it's not autobiographical. This book is about a Gen Xer. It takes place in 2006. He's 26 years old. So he's a young man. He's not of Carlos's generation. The book is about the challenges that young people face today.
Right.
And in that sense, it's not autobiographical. So it has that one strong element in common, but otherwise it's not helpful to think of it as autobiographical, in my opinion.
No, I want to say a few things that I want to share with you about why am I personally obsessed with literature, and why is literature so important, and why those who are writers, poets, playwrights that we've been working with, you know, for a long time here in this town, why is that so important? In a time when there's so much censorship, in a time when you know, even our own compatriots do not support us in those efforts. I'll tell you. When I was growing up, when I was in high school, I was very traumatized. I was very unhappy. I was severely depressed, you know. And why? Because there was a lot of violence in my home. right? I don't want to go into that because it's ugly. But it left me traumatized, and I swore one day as I was sitting, standing at a window in my bedroom at the time, one day I'm going to leave this house, and I'm going to leave this town, and I will never return. I was very lonely. I could not connect with people at school, much less at home. And so then I discovered, thanks to a friend of mine, Anglo-American, The Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, who I quoted a bit earlier. And I was amazed by that book. Let me ask you this, how many of you have read Crime and Punishment? One. Crimen y Castigo. Crimen y Castigo. ¿Eh? No. No. Fyodor Dostoevsky. Ese. Sí, ese. Crimen y Castigo. Raise your hand, please. Anybody else? Okay. So I read Crime and Punishment, and I said, this is me. This is me. And it's about a murderer. I wanted to murder my father. I didn't. Thank God. But anyway, I understood his anger, and I understood his alienation. And at that time, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a physician or a research scientist, or lo and behold, I wanted to be a medical missionary to the great unwashed, either in Latin America or Africa or wherever. Those were my models. But I didn't have the discipline to do that. So I turned to literature, and suddenly and I was already reading a lot. It's amazing how much I was reading in high school compared to the students that I've had here at the college. The students that come into my freshman class, I don't teach anymore, thank God. But, when they come into my class, they haven't read anything. Let alone huge volumes that big that I had read, like Charles Dickens and a number of other writers, by the time I was 18. So among those writers was, of course, Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I said, this is me. And so I realized, here's a man that understands me. If literature can give me this, then it's worth devoting my entire life to it. And that's when I gave up my hopes or my ambition to become a doctor, medical research, whatever. And I devoted to, I just said, I'm just going to study literature. I'll become what? A teacher. I don't care. Fine, no problem. But I cannot let go. And then out of that, okay, now, why did that happen? Now, there are two, how many of you, okay, many of you I'm sure, some of you I'm sure are lifetime readers. You've read all your lives, and you will read all your lives. Some of you never read. Fine, okay. And there's two types of lifetime readers. One, like my children. They grew up in a family where books were being discussed and read every day. There were fights. My wife and I were on the verge of divorce over a literary debate. There she is, right there. She's still here. It was a debate over two Mexican writers, right? Octavio Paz versus what? I'd say Antonio Velasquez Piña, right? All right, well, we didn't divorce. But anyway, so they grew up with that, and they're lifetime readers. They're reading all the time, okay? And as a result, they've done very well professionally, right? Whereas I didn't have that. My parents were at best, had a second grade education. My father did very well financially for himself because he was a businessman. He was very, very, very intelligent. But I needed a community, so I turned to literature. In literature, I found it. But the time came where I wanted to talk to some of these. So I created my own community, writers and thinkers. That's my life. That's why those are my people. That's my community. I live in my mind. Okay, I have a beautiful family, blah, 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 but I also have this. And so one day, I said, I want to talk to Dostoevsky. I want to respond to Dostoevsky. I read all his books. I want to talk to him. How do I talk to him? By writing the book. So essentially, according to this theory that I'm using to analyze my own motivation, according to this theory, I am a writer because of Dostoevsky, who kept me from killing myself. And this book is a conversation at the deepest level with a Russian author who's dead. So Yoltik comes out of that. Oh, by the way, I guess you could say Yoltik in many ways is a Russian character. Because a lot of Nietzschean characters appear in Dostoevsky's novels, especially in all of them, but especially the Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, we've been going on and on. Any more questions? Comments?
Just one comment. So Carlos Castaneda was also obsessed with writing, but he seemed to be writing always to escape the situation that he was in. Was he a big inspiration for you?
Who?
Carlos Castaneda.
I learned a lot from Carlos Castaneda, no question about it. And what I learned about Carlos Castaneda is that I found out about El México Profundo, mystical Mexico, Mexico of the indigenas, Mexico whose mysticism dates back thousands of years in this continent. That's what I got from Castaneda. I didn't understand him. He's quoted in my book. He has influence on this book. So yeah, I suppose you could say that he inspired me. Better yet, informed me. Informed me in my understanding of what I'm trying to write about. So I guess the answer technically would be yes. And one of his great characters that we were talking about earlier is Juan Matus, where I've been investigating for years. Where's, there you are. Okay. I forgot your name now. Sylvia. Okay. Where he says, regarding the conquest of Mexico, and he says, La conquista de México es un reto para toda una vida. It's the challenge of a lifetime. Okay? And I've been trying to understand what that means. I've gotten some answers from a number of Mexican writers. I'm still pursuing it. And I have another book that I'd like to write called Our Lord of Chalma about that issue, but I don't know if I'll be able to. If I were younger, I'd probably have a chance to write it. But I don't know if I'll be able to because it requires a tremendous amount of research. It requires that I go live in Mexico for a couple of, some amount of time. And I don't know if God will allow me to do this. So yes.
He would allow you. Mala hierba nunca muere.
¿Cómo?
He would allow you. Mala hierba nunca muere.
Gracias. Any other questions? Okay, any comments of any kind? Mr. Cook?
¿A qué edad empezó usted a leer?
¿Yo? Bien joven.
¿Qué es joven? Porque yo estoy joven.
5, 6, 7 años. Tal vez más joven, no sé. Yo vengo de familia muy humilde. Mi madre era de Juárez, Chihuahua, de los barrios más pobres allí, donde ha habido muchos homicidios, y allí era ella. Y mi padre era de Puerto Rico, y también venía de familia muy humilde, pero muy luchadores los dos. Pero a mí muy conflictivos. Yo provengo de una familia, de un historial familiar de muchos suicidas. Y yo no estaba muy consciente de ello hasta que empecé a recuperarme yo de mi propia condición, ¿no? Pero es lo que me he dado cuenta. Y ese tipo de trauma lo llevamos muchos mexicoamericanos. Y eso es algo que tenemos que escudriñar, que platicar, que esclarecer para entendernos un poco mejor.
So I think we're out of time.
Are we out of time?
Yeah.
By the way, we have books for sales, and we have 3 books that I'm selling. This one, and I'll sign it for you if you want. And then I have Sex is a Political Condition, which is a book that was so controversial, my wife threw it in my face and said, this is shit. And has to do with sex, of course. What else is interesting? But anyway, and then the third one is which one? Oh, Our House on Waco, which is about growing up in El Paso. Those are the 3 books that are available. The other thing I'm going to ask everybody, if you don't mind, please write me, if you can, and if you remember, a review on Amazon. Whether you like the book or not, just write something. If you didn't like me personally, write about that as well. Bad press is good as good press. Randy, you have anything to say?
Not right now, but I appreciate your asking. That's all good. I've known you for a year. You're an amazing man. No, you are. You're an amazing man.
Tell me, I need that.
I appreciate knowing
No, I'm joking. I really appreciate all this, and I'm very humbled by your attention to this, and I'm very looking forward to working with everybody, the writers, the poets, the playwrights especially.
You said you were gonna talk about the resurgence of writing in radio.
Okay, where's? Okay, there you are, Alberto. Come up here. Tell us about Teatro Chicano.
Teatro Chicano will be presented at the Loreto Theater on November the 8th. It's a Saturday. We will have 4 performances of 4 original plays that were written as part of the Teatro Chicano Festival that originated in 2009 under the direction of Mr. Flores. They are all local authors. The book is in publication right now, which should come out in November. So the presentation will be coinciding with the release of the book.
Yes, and we're going to be giving different talks about that book. Okay, and then also we're going to be starting the workshops again. Is that correct? Okay, I got to get the okay from the college, from the chairman of the English department, that because we need to borrow one of the rooms up there. So the workshops on how to write plays is going to start again, and so all of that. Oh, and then there's the 2 poetry groups, right? Los Poetas del Barrio, and then what is ours? Do we have a name? Los Poetas de la Frontera. That's a lot of work that's going on, and then hopefully we're going to come up with an anthology of some of the best poems being written by people from Laredo. Okay, and you're welcome to attend and participate and become associated with our movimiento literario. Es todo. ¿Ya?
All right. Thank
Gracias.
you. Thank you. Yeah.